It's true. We don't know as of February 2025 where 45 of the 48 teams will be playing at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We could still review the schedule, though, to see how we can start thinking about our travels for 2026. Dímelo, mi gente, travel football fan here. I'm helping fans save money and travel the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So, I've already been hosting several consultations, which, by the way, you can go ahead and book your own personalized consultation on my website, travelfootballfan.com, about, hey, how should I be thinking about this travel for the World Cup? Am I going to be able to go from New York to LA the next day? Probably not. So let's take a look at the schedule. We already know where Mexico, Canada, and the USA are playing. We don't know about everybody else. But if you had an idea, like for example, I'm going to stay in Mexico to watch those games, okay, we can review the schedule. Oh, I'm thinking about staying West Coast. All right, let's go ahead and take a look and at least give you an idea of just how many days of hotels you might need, how many flights you might have to take, or if it's a road trip. Let's just take a look, okay, and let's get some general ideas out the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the match schedule. It is available on my website, travelfootballfan.com. You just have to click on FIFA tourneys and then click on the 2026 FIFA World Cup logo. And so let's focus with one of the most requested travel itineraries, and that is the Mexico matches. Okay, remember, there are 13 matches in total. Okay, and you see these right here. It's in the central region right here. As you can see, there's basically 10 games in the group stage, or excuse me, 11 games in the group stage, and then, no, excuse me, it was 10. And then 3 knockout games for Mexico, 1 in Monterrey and 2 in Mexico City. Mexico City has the most games with 5, followed then by Guadalajara 4 and Monterrey with 4. Okay. So, what you're going to be noticing right away when you're looking at the Mexico matches is the number of days in between the matches, okay? Which tends to be more or less about 2 days in between one match to the next. Or I should say 3, right? If you're counting 1 day, 2 day, and then game 3 is the match day, okay? So if your plan was to stay in Mexico for the duration of the group stage, at least, you're going to have to then consider the fact that you're missing out on games in between, right? Maybe not so much here in the middle, although, actually, no, let me take that back. If you look at here, for example, the Mexico M1 match, you could be going to either LA or San Francisco, right? Take the flights to either LA, San Francisco, literally the next day, although you probably will miss this match. You probably could make the San Francisco one because then there's no games in between here for 2 full days that you could realistically get to, right? Because to fly all the way to Boston from Mexico City, that's at least a 6-hour flight, okay? About 6 hours to New York, more or less, 5, 6, give or take, okay? That's not going to be feasible, right? Because that's going to take you right away out of the Mexico zone. And then remember, you have to come back. So you might have to consider doing watch parties in this in between these matches, right? Because at Mexico, then you're gonna go what to Monterrey, okay, and then you can either hop back to Mexico City or make your way to Guadalajara, and then back to Monterrey, Guadalajara. You see the difficulty of you're not gonna get as many games watched in person if your game plan is to stay in Mexico the entire time. You could do the watch parties. Oh, that for sure. You'll have a great time. I'm more convinced that that will be the case, right? So you'll be able to see maybe 4 or 5 games if you're able to get tickets to all of these Mexico games. But then you're also going to be seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these World Cup matches, if not more, of course, uh, at the fan zones. So that's what you have to consider, okay? If you're going to do a Mexico only strategy, bueno, that means you're realistically only going to 5 group stage matches. And then there's going to be at least, 2 days in between those games where you're doing, the fan festivals. Okay. And then, of course, as we get into the knockout round, right, the last Mexico game, right, in terms of the country, is in Guadalajara. And then there's another 3 days in between to then go to Monterrey. Then the next day, Mexico City, which, again, depending on the timing of the flights, you could potentially do that. And then there's this massive 5-day gap until the last round. What is this round of 16 match available in Mexico? So I'm not saying don't do this, right? Don't do this itinerary because Mexico is going to be loads of fun. What I am saying though is that you have to keep in mind if your strategy was to go see as many games in person, you're not going to achieve that in Mexico because of the number of days in between the matches that Mexico is actually going to be hosting in 2026. Okay, let's take a look at the west coast of the United States because I think this is a really fascinating one. Okay, on paper, it looks like a very feasible travel area, but it really is combining two unique regions. Okay, so we can easily see as California. Okay, and as you can see here with LA and San Francisco, their games literally the next day after each other, with maybe a 1 day, kind of break in between. So if you're looking to maximize the number of group games that you're going to want to see, this is definitely a good one. Okay, I know that the last one here is probably the same group. Match 60, match 59, same group. The third match of the group stage always has to be played at the same time. So you're gonna have to either pick LA or San Francisco here, but you're gonna be able to ping pong quite easily back and forth between San Francisco and LA. The thing is this: you will have to fly, right? If you want to, get to the next city the fastest. And again, depending on the match time, right? The kickoff times, that's going to be important here. We don't know when these games are going to start at the local time zone. So please keep that in mind as the variable as we're discussing all these plans. But assuming that there's enough time to get on a plane, it might have to be a red eye and get to San Francisco or get back to LA on time, then you're going to be able to pull off the strategy. So, of course, those that live in LA, it seems an easier strategy to fly to San Francisco. And then if you want to stay there, that's fine. Come back the next day, you have a break, and then boom, do it again, right? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? But definitely it's going to be more oriented towards flying here compared to, say, traveling by car or traveling by rail. The Vancouver-Seattle one is a bit different, though. Okay, yes, there's less games here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. Whereas here you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, you can do a California strategy where you're going to see 9 group stage games, right? If you're able to get all of the 9 California games, right? Granted, 2 of them are U.S., so let's say you're going to be able to maybe get just 7. For the Pacific Northwest, you might be able to get less tickets, right? Because it's 2 of them home Canada matches, 1 USA. So let's just assume it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So then now you're going to have this possibility where if you wanted to just do Pacific Northwest, it might not be as many games that you can get to because, again, of these home matches being extremely highly in demand. So what you could do is, and part of the reason why this is considered as a cluster here, of games is that you can go to the first 2, Vancouver, Seattle, and then fly down to California, take advantage of these set of games, and then come back to the Pacific Northwest and conclude your travels there. Again, this is purely on the group stage. We'll take a look later on for these knockout round matches. But yeah, that would be the way that you would travel the Pacific Northwest. The other advantage that Vancouver and Seattle has, I would say, compared to California, is that you could drive in between Vancouver and Seattle. It took my wife and I about a 3.5 hour drive around there. Granted, there's going to be more traffic here for the World Cup, so do expect that to increase your travel time. Also, do expect the travel time to be increased because of the border checkpoint, especially if there's no easy way to travel between these cities, negotiated between the 3 governments, then yeah, that's going to take more time to navigate that border crossing. You could also do rail, right, with Amtrak. But again, the Amtrak will stop at the Canadian border to conduct those border checks as well. So overall, the Pacific Northwest might be slightly easier to travel, relatively speaking, compared to California. But in California, you are going to have more matches in the group stage that you're going to be able to travel to during those first couple of weeks of 2026. Quick break here because I realize I'm 10 minutes into the video and I still have other travel places to discuss. I appreciate y'all support throughout this entire time. We still have to meet a 3,000 watch hour goal for this channel to be monetized. So please, if you haven't watched all my previous videos, please do so. have it on loop on while you're preparing dinner. I have an actual playlist of all the videos that I consider as preparation for the 2026 World Cup, and this one will be added to that playlist as well. So again, I really appreciate your support. Share it to your friends and family because there ain't no point in gatekeeping this information. The more information people have in their hands, they're going to be able to make smart financial decisions for the 2026 World Cup, especially since I've seen a recent rise in people thinking that they won't be able to get tickets because they're being sold on Ticketmaster, which is not the case for the World Cup. Again, this information as of February 2025. So again, thank you so much. Okay, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click on that bell button so that way you know when my next videos do come out. Thank you so much. All right, let's talk about the Northeast next because I do think this is going to be the best region to travel for the 2026 World Cup because of Amtrak. Hands down, Amtrak. Even then, let's say there is a breakage in Amtrak service, there's still coach buses. Yes, you can rent your own car. Even Ubers in between it, yeah, it'd be a little bit more expensive, but it's possible because of the driving distances at least between Philadelphia and New York, are relatively short. And even from New York to Boston, it's slightly longer, but it's possible you could go ahead and pull off by private transportation. But like I said, this entire region of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York is tied very well. And if we extend out to Toronto, yes, you can still get there on Amtrak. It's going to be a bit more in terms of time. So ideally, you probably would fly from either Philly, New York, Newark, and remember, New York has three airports. That's Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK. And then from Boston to Toronto and then come back. That probably will be your strategy. And even in the Northeast, say, for example, you cannot find affordable hotel rates in the host cities. There are plenty of smaller towns and cities in between, right? And even further out that you can stay at. So I'm thinking, and if you look this up, the United States megalopolis, a lot of the maps will tell you it's from Boston to Washington, D.C. It's kind of really expanded from Portland, Maine to as far south as Richmond, Virginia. So there is that possibility for you that if you're going to be traveling for this region, I probably would stay between Portland, Maine and Washington, D.C. Not so much Richmond, even though Richmond's just an extra hour from here in Washington, D.C. south. But at least from D.C. to Philadelphia is about a 2-hour Amtrak ride. It's not too bad. The reason why I'm mentioning all this is because you can see here the cluster of games that you'll be able to travel in between these 4 cities, right? So you could do a strategy where, maybe your main focus is Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, I should say, not New York. I know. My New Jersey people, I understand it's in East Rutherford. All right, I understand. But for the majority of the world coming here, they're going to think New York. So I apologize in advance to my peeps in New Jersey. All right. You see that it is possible to travel in between, right? So, like, even for example, if you're doing a Philly, New York, New Jersey strategy, well, you could still go fly, perhaps the next day, and again, depending on those match times, go to Toronto and then come back the next day, right? There's like a break here in the entire region, right? Which then allows you to reset. Do you want to go to Boston? You want to go back to Philly? And then you can go fly back to Toronto and then another reset here, and then you can decide. So it is possible for you to do really, possible, right? Maybe not the Canadian home game. You could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 matches in total. Again, depending on the kickoff times for this entire region. So if your goal is to see the most games, I probably would do the Northeast, comparatively speaking, because of the ease of transportation and the less distances between the cities that you have to cover. That's what's going to really help you here in the Northeast. Okay, let's talk about Atlanta, Miami, and then we'll pair in the Central together as a group here because it's really straightforward. Look, between Atlanta and Miami, the two party cities in this entire World Cup, probably not the best strat. If the mission is to see as many games as possible. If you want to party, sure, by all means, right? But realistically, you're only going to be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. It's almost like a Mexico travel schedule. It is less. I can't even say it's less breaks in between because it's realistically 2 days in between. So this travel strategy is just more so for those probably a lot younger than me. If you want to be at the club, pretty much every day of the World Cup, this is probably going to be the schedule for you. because you're just going to go between the two cities. You're going to party for 2 nights and then go see the World Cup match, come back to the other city, party for 2 nights, so on and so forth. So as you can see here, not really a good, base camp, again, if the mission is to see as many games. But if you want to party, I mean, Miami and Atlanta is going to be the place to be. As for the central region, right? Houston, Dallas, KC, okay? Realistically, you could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, potential matches. Again, depending on those kickoff times. You're definitely going to be flying either between Houston and Dallas to KC. I would say the travel road distance, that's at least 4 or 5 hours. I probably should have mapped this out here. Before I started talking, right, in that situation. But more likely than not, you're going to be depending on flights, just because that's going to help you get to these destinations a little bit faster. Here, I just did the Google Maps. Oh, it's actually 8-hour drive from Dallas to Kansas City. So you're definitely going to be flying, okay? There is no Amtrak service. So again, depending on those kickoff times, you might not be able to see all 8 games, but if your strategy is to stay in this part of the country, more of the heartland of the United States, then sure, that will be one way to travel this World Cup. I mean, there's going to be plenty of games, so that's not really a major concern there. But yeah, those flights will add up. So hopefully you are collecting your travel points and miles, or at least saving up a bunch of cash in order to be able to afford all the flights that you're going to be taking in between Texas and Kansas City. All right, let's take a look at some knockout round possibilities here for your travels. And the main thing I want to point out is that West Coast, you're wrapping up your games practically after the round of 16. I know you have one more match right here, the quarterfinal in Los Angeles, but you're basically done after this point. So your travel is going to start shifting from the West Coast over to the Central region. You got here Dallas and KC, but realistically, you're going all the way to the East Coast, okay? I have already done a video on my socials. You can check it out on my TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts about how to travel the Final Four. So that's pretty self-explanatory. I would just do, Dallas, Atlanta, and then Miami, Newark, right? It again, depending on the kickoff times of when you can leave the Dallas game, and then hopefully you'll be able to watch the Dallas game, and then catch a red eye to get to Atlanta the next day. And then same situation with Miami, New York. If you're able to pull that off, great. Don't be surprised if you might just have to do the Dallas game and the Miami game, or the Atlanta game and the Newark game, or the Atlanta Miami, again, because of when those flights are taking off to the next day, right? Okay. In terms of the region where you can see the most number of matches in the knockout rounds, I mean, that's kind of even. If you think about it, but here at least in this Eastern region, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're gonna be able to see right here in the round of 32, round of 16. In this Central region, realistically speaking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then in the West Coast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, you're seeing as we get into the knockout rounds, the West Coast is going to start seeing a decline in the number of games, and we're moving everybody from the West down, or I should say, over to the East Coast. The number of games becomes much more frequent over here compared to the West Coast. So think about that as your strategy, right? If your strategy is to see the most number of games, not in the group stage, but in the knockout rounds, then maybe staying to the East Coast is your best option, right? If you look at the cluster of games over here, then that means you're going to want to stay in the midpoint between these different locations. It's going to cost you a lot more in terms of flying between these different cities, for sure. It's going to cost you more there. But if your plans are to go see these knockout rounds instead of the group stage matches, then that's something you have to consider. Okay. Also, something to consider if you were staying, at least for the group stage, in the Northeast area, you see this massive gap of no games in Philadelphia, New York, all the way until the finals. So Philly, yes, you are hosting that July 4th match. That's your last match. From there until July 19th, there's absolutely no activity happening in the Northeast. So that means even people in the Northeast that were staying here for these matches do have to kind of either go south towards Atlanta, Miami, right? You see this cluster of games right here between Atlanta and Miami, or go towards Dallas, KC, and then come back. So again, The possibilities of travel here are endless, to say the least. All right, mi gente, let's wrap up the video here. Again, thank you so much for your support. Like I said, we need 3,000 more watch hours to get this channel monetized. So please, if you haven't watched all my content, please do so. Share it with your friends and family. You don't understand how much that helps. Ain't no point gatekeeping this information. The more people know about how to plan and travel and organize for the 2026 World Cup, the more money we're able to save, folks. And thus, especially with the economy being so, it's important that we all save as much money as we can. Okay. Again, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. Click on the bell button. Make sure that you do all that, so that way you're notified when the next video comes out. And again, I'm going to try to continue to be as consistent as possible. It is difficult to produce these videos sometimes, because sometimes you're trying to think of content of what to do, and then other days, boom, it pops up, and we get to do a video. So again, thank you so much for your support. You have my website, travelfootballfan.com. In case you need to book a consultation, let me know, and we'll get you set up with a personalized travel plan just for you. Bueno, mi gente, ojalá nos vemos en el Mundial de 2026. Pa'lante vamos, mi gente. Muchas gracias.